Hello, everybody. This is Gilgamesh. And today we're reading in Book of Yoel, chapter 4, verse 10. Now, if your Book of Yoel doesn't have a chapter 4, it's probably because there's a difference between the way Hebrew numbers its chapters and verses and the way most English versions, including King James and English Standard Version and a lot of the other English versions, number theirs. Won't explain the history of it. In fact, I'm not even positive why it's different in the Book of Yoel, but in Hebrew, Yoel has 4 chapters, and in English, it has 3. So in many English Bibles, you will find this verse as Yoel chapter 3, verse 10. But let's read it here. Kotu itechem lecharavot umazmorotechem leramachim hachalash yomar giborani. Okay, so let's take it apart. This first word here, kotu, it comes from the root katat, kaf, tav, tav, and this is a call imperfect masculine plural. It means to crush or to beat. So here this is a command, it's an imperative. I think I might have said imperfect, I meant imperative. This is an imperative here, so it's a command to a group of multiple peoples. So beat, and then this one here, itechem. This is a fun word, not one we have very often. You can see here on the lexicon over on the right that this means a plowshare or a mattock. It is some sort of an agricultural implement made from iron. It's not used very often. In fact, in 2 Kings 6:5 perhaps is the most famous use of this word here, where it is apparently an axe head that somebody was chopping a tree with, and it wasn't attached well and flipped off and landed in the water, and oh no, I've lost my axe head. And the prophet Eliyahu comes over and pokes a stick in the water and gets it back out, causes the iron to swim, as it was said. But yeah, that's the same word here. This is some sort of an agricultural implement made from iron, a plowshare, a mattock, something like that. So this is saying, beat your plowshares, lecharavot. A charav is a sword. So beat your plowshares to swords. Now, some of you might already say this sounds familiar, but that's not quite the way I remember it. That's because this is a reference to Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4, which is also quoted in Micah chapter 4, verse 3. But this is a reversal of it. So if we were to translate this whole verse roughly here, it says, beat your plowshares to sword and your pruning hooks to spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. So this is a complete reversal of the Isaiah verse. And we're talking about being more ready for war, having this roughly agricultural people prepare to go into battle. And so, yes, beat your plowshares to swords. This is a feminine plural. Here, sword is a feminine word. So we have the ot ending on here. Umazmarotechem. Mazmarotechem is an interesting word. We don't know a lot about what it means. You can see here in the lexicon that it shows up all of 4 times. And one of them is in Isaiah 2:4, which is the other version of this. And the other time's in Micah 4:3, which also quotes Isaiah 2:4. And the other one is in Isaiah 18:5, which is where we actually learn what this verse means. And the other one here is in Yoel chapter 4, verse 10. Isaiah 18:5, if we were to look at that, it talks about that it was used to cut off these sprigs with pruning hooks, to cut off branches of a vine. So this is how we know what this implement actually is, because this word doesn't show up very often. So this is some sort of a vine dresser's knife. Now, there is a very closely related word that just simply means a knife of some kind. This is a conjectural reading, which is what the asterisk means over here. But this word knife, it doesn't mention it in the lexicon here, but if you look at all these references from the lexicon, and they all show up here in 1st and 2nd Kings and Chronicles and one time in Jeremiah, and each of them actually isn't just referring to any kind of knife, it's referring to an implement that they used in the temple to trim the wicks of the various lamps there, including most likely the menorah. And so that was a very closely related word to this idea of a pruning hook here, is this wick trimmer that they used in the temple. Every one of these is a reference to its use in the temple and not just simply as a regular knife. But this is some sort of a shear, to trim a wick is also a word that is very closely related to this one. So that is pruning hooks. This is a masculine plural. We don't have the vav here, which is somewhat common in Hebrew, that we drop out the vav on the feminine plural ending, but it's also a construct state here, which is where this a comes here, and then we have kim, which is a second person plural suffix on this. So this is your pruning hooks. So, and pruning hooks, your being plural. So, and your pruning hooks, le ramachim. So what is a ramachim? Ramachim comes from romach, and there's a lot in this lexicon entry here. Most of it's not terribly important, but it's some sort of a lance, sometimes translated as spear, sometimes as javelin. It's not terribly clear if this was always a throwing instrument, which would be more like a javelin, or if this was more of a hold it and poke people with it kind of instrument, which would be more of a traditional spear. It is a very common weapon referenced, and it also talks about other weapons that it is referenced with, sometimes with a shield up here, often parallel with magin, which is a shield. And it's got other things here, parallel with a sword and so forth. But this is an incredibly common implement of war of some kind, either a spear or a javelin, something like that. So that's your real reference to Isaiah there. Beat your plowshares to swords and your pruning hooks to spears. A reversal of the Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. And then we have the final clause here, a chalash. What is a chalash? It's a good question, because it only shows up here. This is the only place where this word shows up as a noun. And so we assume it means weakling. And if you look at the lexicon here, we assume it means weakling because it is parallel with gibor, which is obviously its opposite. If we scroll up in our lexicon a little bit, though, we will see there is a verb, two different definitions of which. One is a verb which means to be weak, which is used a couple of places, not exactly common. It's conjectured to be in Isaiah 26:16. It shows up in Job 14:10, so not exactly a common word. And the other word of it here is to be defeated, and it shows up in Job as well. It shows up in Exodus and Isaiah 14. And it means to be carried off dead. Okay, defeated, so forth, to be weak. And so we get from this that this word as a noun must mean a weak person, a weakling. So we have the chalash, yomar. Yomar, this is a call imperfect third masculine singular, but this is also a jussive. So this is let him say. And this is an unusual word order to have the subject first, but this is sort of, the weakling, let him say. And then this would be the direct quote of what he says. Gibor ani. A gibor. What is a gibor? A gibor means mighty or big one. It implies masculinity and so forth, but it also has a very heavy military context to it. Warrior, I think, is the best translation for a gibor. So gibor ani, I am a warrior. So let the weak person say, I am a warrior. Now, one last thing I wanted to say here is that what I've been reading from here is Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, and this text is also available in Biblia Hebraica Quinta, which is the new edition of Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, but it's not fully published yet. It's being published in sections, but the 12 prophets have all been published in it. Now, this verse has no footnotes in the apparatus in BHS, but in BHQ, if I were to flip over to HIT here, and I wasn't reading from it directly because this implementation of BHQ has several other problems, but here we have the same verse in BHQ, and here it is, same thing. And the way BHQ does things is it has this little circle, which indicates that there is a corresponding footnote, and there are two footnotes in this verse. One of the problems it has is that the footnotes kind of show up a little bit out of order here. This footnote here is a reference to this over here, the MP, and this little lamed with a dot over it. MP stands for Masora Parva. The Masorah are notes that were added by the Masoretes to the Masoretic text, particularly as we're talking about here in the Leningrad Codex. These notes could appear at the top of pages, at the end of books, and most commonly in the margins and sometimes between lines. And so this is the Masorah Parva, which is what we call it when the notes did not contain meat or dairy. No, seriously, this is the Masorah Parva were notes that were in the margins or between the lines. So not the ones at the beginning, not the ones at the ends, but the ones between the lines. And this is a fairly uninteresting footnote. The lamed with a dot over it means that the word is singular. It does not occur anywhere else in the entire corpus of the Hebrew Bible. And it's referring to this word right here and their pruning hooks. This is the only time that it shows up in exactly this form and spelling, not the other places in Isaiah and Micah and so forth. This is the only time it shows up this way. So that's the first note there. Not terribly important, but it is interesting that before computers, they kept track of these kind of things, which had to be an incredible task to discover that this did not show up anywhere else in a text as long as the Bible. But as scribes, they were very cautious about such things so that they could check their own work, and they would actually go through and do this kind of checking to make sure the text was very accurate when they were copying it. And this word right here, the weak one, hachalas. Now this goes to the footnote up here where it says 410, and it has the very word we're looking at. And then it gives a set of textual witnesses afterwards, starting with this MUR, which we'll skip for the moment, and then the G here, which is the Old Greek, also known as a Septuagint, and tells us here particularly this is the particular version of Greek Septuagint here known as Aquila. And so this is a particular textual copy of the Greek Septuagint. And then we have here the Vulgate, we have here the Syriac, and we have here the Targum. And then we have this little symbol right here, which says that it separates a reading and its witnesses from other readings and their witnesses within a case. So this note is called a case, and this tells us this is the end of one set of witness readings. So that means all these witnesses here roughly agree, and they agree with what is actually in our text here, because this is exactly the same as it shows up in the text, which we just translated as the weak one. So we skipped over MUR. What is MUR? If you highlight over it, it says Morabaat 88. What is Morabaat? Well, it's actually a reference to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Cave 5 of the Dead Sea Scrolls was found in Wadi Morabaat, and it's south of Qumran. It's maybe 20 kilometers or so south of Qumran, right on the western edge of the Dead Sea. And there are actually 12 caves that are part of the Dead Sea Scrolls collections, and they're not all right there in Qumran, although a lot of the very important caves are. This one is quite a bit south, although there are still some that are even further south, all the way down to Masada. But this is indicating that this is from Cave 5, and it is scroll number 88, which if you look that up, you will find that it is a fragmentary scroll of the 12 prophets that we found in Cave 5. That includes the latter part of the book of Yoel, along with several other of the books, the 12 prophets. And so it's telling us that this reading, the one we have in the Leningrad Codex, is supported by that scroll. So we know that this reading was in existence all the way back to probably 1st or 2nd century BCE. So this first group of texts here all support the reading as we have it. But, and this is where this comes to a different set of readings, we have this little bit of Greek here, which tells us that this is the reading for more than one witness to the Old Greek as given in the apparatus of the relevant collation standard. In other words, there are several Greek manuscripts of the Septuagint that read something different here. What do they read? They read O Dunatos, which means the strong. So instead of reading the weak here, it reads the strong, which is kind of strange. The strong, he shall say, I am a warrior. I guess that works. It doesn't work as nicely as the weak person saying that, but that is what some Greek manuscripts have, and they judge this here to be an error, that there was an error in writing the consonantal text. So they had a version of the manuscript which had some sort of an error here, and that's why they believe some Greek manuscripts read the strong rather than the weak one. So this is what you get with textual criticism. You find that there, with hand-copied text, errors happen, and so you have to make judgment calls as to which one is the best reading. The fact that this is supported by an ancient Dead Sea Scroll means that the tradition is much older than any of our received texts, and so it stands on very solid ground. It's also supported by other prominent copies of the Septuagint, the Vulgate, the Syriac, and the Targum. So we've got a lot of textual witnesses saying that this is the correct reading, although there are clearly some traditions that have something different here in the Hebrew text. Part of the fun of interpreting these. So the verse then, beat your plowshares to swords and your pruning hooks to spears. Let the weak person say, I am a warrior. And so the idea here is to take up strength and to be ready to fight. A complete reversal from the peaceful message of Isaiah. One of the questions, of course, would be, did Isaiah quote this and reverse it? Did this quote Isaiah and reverse Isaiah? Or are they both quoting some older text or possibly saying that was popular among the people that is independent of both texts? When we get into dating the book of Yoel, it's very difficult. There's not a lot of clues in the text itself to say exactly when it was written or where this falls in the timeline of history. And so which one is first is a little bit of an open question. It's generally accepted that Yoel is the later book. It's far from settled. But yeah, definite connection to Isaiah here, interesting reversal, and a different look on a very famous and important scripture. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and subscribe and join us on Discord if you'd like to talk about this kind of thing some more. Thank you very much.